this is Pastor Barry Jones from Spout Church, and I'm one of the pastors there. And I want you to know, first of all, that Steve is just fine. He just throws me a bone every now and again and gives me the opportunity to preach. That's what he's done for me today, and he will be back next week. But I also want to take a moment to also encourage you to go to our online church platform. The link should be below so that you can go there. There's a great interactive experience there where you can ask for prayer and some other things. And we hope that you will take the opportunity to take a look at that. So we are continuing with our series called Asking for a Friend, which is about mental health. And today I want to talk to you about something that I believe is very important. And I think it is something that a lot of people don't take the opportunity to use. And to start off, I want to tell you a little bit about our upbringing. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people that I talk to kind of fall into one of two categories. And you may have done the same. When you were younger, growing up in your home, and you got sick, there were two types of reactions, two types of homes, and two ways of dealing with that. My wife grew up in the kind of home where if she went to her mom and said, "I'm sick," then her mom would move her to the couch. She would give her several pillows to prop her up. She would take a card table and set it right next to her. And on that card table would be the remote control for the TV, a big bottle of ginger ale, and a glass. And her mother would come in periodically and just check on her and make sure that she was doing okay. And then there was my house. In my house, if I got sick, first, my mother would need visual confirmation. She actually had to see me vomit, or I had to show her that it had actually happened. And I would bring her into the bathroom and I would say, "There it is, Mom. I didn't flush the evidence. It's sitting right there in the toilet bowl. Last night's roast beef." And my mother would not get all soft and maternal. That was not her thing. Instead, what would happen is I would be sent to my room where I was to sleep for the next 24 hours in darkness and not do anything, not go outside, not read, not anything. And either I would walk back out on my own later, or the stench of my corpse would let them know that, oh, Barry didn't make it and it's time to rent out his room. And that illustration, that story, it just kind of leads into the fact that in my home, there were, of course, in every home, there's a lot of rules, but in my home, there were two particular rules. And one of them was you don't ask for help, even among brothers and sisters and stuff. You don't ask for help. And didn't matter how old you were. "Mom, I broke my arm and I'm 6 years old." Well, walk it off and take an aspirin. And rule number two was that you don't tell people our business. That may be a phrase that some of you are familiar with. Don't tell people our family business. And because those were the rules for me growing up, it was very difficult for me to ask for help. That mentality carried me through college, my jobs, my ministries. It's something that I still wrestle with to this very day. It is very difficult for me to ask for help. And I've gotten better in some areas, and in some areas I still struggle with it very, very much. And it's difficult when you can't ask for help and you can't tell people your business. It's very hard to open up about your shortcomings, about your issues, your idiosyncrasies, your fears, and your stuff. And let's face it, we all have stuff. We all have things that we are trying to work through and do better at. And I believe that it is very important that we, when necessary, get the help that we need. And so what I want to talk to you about today is counsel, not necessarily counseling. We're going to go see a professional counselor. That falls under that umbrella. But I want to talk to you specifically about basically going to others for help and being open to others. And that counsel can take the form of an accountability partner. It can be talking to your own spouse. It can be a trusted friend. It can be a connection group. It can be a lot of things. But basically, it's the idea of us sharing with others, this is what I'm going through, what do you think, and then getting that feedback. And that is something that And very often we are afraid to do. We're afraid to reach out and do that kind of thing. But before we dive into the points this morning, what I want to do is read you from Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 4, starting at verse 9. And it says this: 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. And so that's what I want to talk about today, is the fact that we need the help of others, we need the support of others, and that there is no shame in that. And when we go to others and we get that counsel, we get that advice, that wise counsel, that wise advice, it's going to do several things for us. It's going to do a lot of things, but there are 3 things specifically that I want to talk to you about today that it is going to do, that I believe that we all need help with. This isn't about somebody who is weaker than someone else. This isn't for a select group of people. This is for everyone. And when we go to others and we get that counsel, this is what it's going to help us with. Okay? And the first thing it's going to help us with is this. It is going to help, counsel is going to help define reality. We don't always perceive things the way that we think they are. And very often, experience can fool us. And a very good example of this is in the first few chapters of Proverbs. In Proverbs, they set up kind of a story where basically a father is speaking to his son. And over again, the father is explaining to the son, you need to understand, these situations, there are certain situations, it may look like this, but really it's this. This is the reality. It only looks this way, but this is how it really is, okay? And he gives several examples, such as he talks about the wicked and people that purposely do harm to others and break the law and do terrible things. And he says it looks like they're getting by in life easily and that they're making life easier for themselves, but they're not. In the end, it's just going to lead to destruction. And he talks about adultery. He says, adultery is a real thing, and it is a temptation. And it may seem like something that you can slough off, or may even be fun, but it is more enticing than you think, and it is more destructive than you can imagine. It looks this way, but it's actually a terrible thing that will destroy your reputation, your family, everything. He talks about God's discipline, how it looks like when you're being disciplined by God, it looks like maybe God has abandoned you, but really it's proof that he has not abandoned you and he still loves you. And he goes and he talks about all of these things. He talks about gossip, and he talks about just all of these situations where it may look like this, but the reality is that it looks like this. And so when we are interacting with someone, when it comes to kind of defining that reality, it does it in a couple of ways. One way it does it is it helps drill down to the deeper issue. Sometimes we are dealing with something and it is just simply an effect and not a cause. And very often when we rush in, because that's the way I am, I love to if I see a problem, I just want to go in, I just want to fix it. And the problem with that is that sometimes I will be fixing an effect instead of a cause. And when we sit down with somebody and we talk about the deeper issue, sometimes it'll help us see what the real issue is, so that that situation doesn't just keep cropping up. One of the things that if you do go to a counselor and you talk to them, and this is something that I've run into when I'm talking to people, is that every now and again you'll be sitting down with somebody who is depressed. And any counselor that is worth anything will begin to see if maybe part of the problem, and it could be a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons may be anger. Very often people have a problem with anger, and they struggle with that over the course of their life. They feel more and more out of control. They're angry about their needs not being met. They're angry about the situations and how they can't fix those. And that will actually morph into a depression. And that's something that a lot of people wouldn't make that connection. And so that is the deeper issue. It isn't so much depression is the issue, but anger is. And that's something that a professional counselor can help people get through. Another situation is that when it comes to defining reality and that good counsel, is that it also helps us see our blind spots. We all have these blind spots where we just kind of glaze over and we don't really think about it, or we think too well without really digging into the situation. It could be our own kids. Maybe there's a situation there where it's just like, oh, well, it'll be all right. There are just certain areas that have certain blind spots that we just kind of ignore. And very often we need somebody to come in and shine a light on that and just say, well, what you need to realize is this is the reality. So if you are somebody that has a certain issue, I strongly encourage you to talk to someone who can help you see the reality of it. And if you have somebody that speaks to you truthfully, you are very blessed. Very often, that is very difficult to find. We don't want to embarrass others. We don't want to insult others. We don't want to offend others. And so we're just constantly keeping things to ourselves, especially if we consider that person a friend. But a real friend will say, have you considered this? And show them what it is that they need to be seeing. Okay? So counsel does that. It helps us define reality. Another thing that counsel will do is that it will help us take ownership. It helps us take ownership of the issue or the situation that we are in. I don't know how well this illustration is going to translate, but at my last church, there was a situation where there was a lady, an older lady in her 70s at least, and she had passed away. And of course, she's old enough to have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And when I heard that she may, that something terrible had happened, I wasn't too far from her house, and I went to her house. And I arrived as the paramedics were still working on her. And then she was taken to the hospital, of course. And I was the second person at the hospital. There was a family member waiting there already, and then I arrived, and then slowly more family members came in. So I, immediately, as soon as I could, I got to the hospital. Then I assisted with other arrangements. Of course, I was part of this funeral, and some other things. And then I kind of gave that family space, because I figured, well, certainly they've seen enough of me. They just need some time to process, to grieve, and they don't need me hovering over them. And I would later find out that they were really mad that I had given them that space. And here's the conversation that really killed me. I'm talking to the woman that passed away. I'm talking to one of her daughters. And she said, yeah, you did this, and you did this, and you did this. You were at the house, you were at the hospital, you helped with arrangements, and you did this. But you didn't do this. And because I had not done this one thing, all the other things that I had done didn't count anymore. And I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with somebody where they say something so outrageous that you can't even respond. You're so stunned that the words just stick in your mouth. And that was the situation I was in. And of course, I was bitter and angry and just kind of walked away. And then years later, and here's the part that's really difficult for me. Years later, as I was going through my quiet time, I realized that I had said the same thing to God. God, you saved me from my sins. You are there for me in more ways than I can list. You've given me a wonderful job. You've given me a wonderful family, and you've given me health, and you've given me all of these other things. But you know what? You haven't done this. And so I'm mad at you. And it was a real bitter pill for me to swallow when I realized that I had been doing that. And maybe some of you can relate to that. The thing is that very often we're simply blaming God, and we're finding someone to blame when really we need to be taking responsibility and ownership for the situation and be asking ourselves, what is it that I've done to contribute towards this? There's a story in 2 Samuel chapter 12, and I'm not going to read to you the whole chapter, but I'm just going to kind of give you a summary. And this is where King David has done one terrible thing after another. He's had an affair with a woman named Bathsheba. He has gotten her pregnant. He tried to cover it up in a way that didn't work. And then because that didn't work, he had the husband killed. And Nathan approaches him and says, I'm going to tell you a story. There's a story of a poor man and a rich man. And the rich man has many sheep and many cattle and is very well off. And then there's one poor man who has one lamb. And the rich man goes, steals the lamb, and then kills the owner. What would you do with that person? And King David says, that's terrible. That the rich person, he deserves to die. And Nathan says, you're that man. You've already have several wives. You went and had an affair with this one woman and then killed her husband. And it was at that point that David, who had been just trying to rationalize his behavior this entire time, finally took ownership of what it was that he had done. And it was just very jarring. And we see him have this incredible moment of contrition and asking for forgiveness. But we need to make sure that whatever the situation is, that we are taking responsibility for our role in it. It could be things that we've done that we shouldn't have done. It could be things that we didn't do in order to prepare for it. But when we sit down and we talk to somebody and we're getting that wise advice and we're getting that wise counsel, they can say to us, yeah, well, but have you considered this? And it helps us take responsibility for the things that we are doing. One of the things that a lot of married couples, when they go in for counseling, and I did the same thing. My wife and I have gone in for counseling in the past, and I'm actually going to tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I remember going in really thinking, wow, I really hope he takes my side on this. I think he will. And there's a lot of married couples who go into counseling with that mindset, without the mindset of what is my role in this and what is the other person's role. We have to take responsibility for what it is that we're responsible for. And sitting down with wise counsel will help us to see that, okay? So it helps us define reality. Counsel helps us define reality. It helps us to take responsibility for what we're responsible for. And then last, it helps give you perspective on you, which is something we all need. It helps give you perspective on you. And what I mean by that is this. It seems like we have these two voices that just roll in our head all the time. And one of those voices says, you know what, you are awesome, you are the best. And we have another voice that just crops up that just says, you know what, you are absolutely terrible, you are the worst human being in the history of the world. And it just seems like we're either having to listen to one or the other, and neither one of them are true. And when we can sit down with someone and get perspective on who we really are as someone that was made in God's image, it's going to help us get over the pride that comes from thinking that we're awesome, and it's going to help us to get over the shame of thinking that we're no good. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot of as we're all being quarantined is that there are people that are essential and there are people that are non-essential. And one of the groups of people that are being targeted as non-essential now are people in sports, athletes, people in movies, actors, actresses, people in the entertainment industry in general. And I kind of find it funny because what's interesting is that all of those people were put in that position because we're the ones who put them there. We are the ones who look up to them and praise them. And can you imagine if when Kobe Bryant passed away not too long ago, if somebody in response had said, yeah, but is he really that essential? People would have lost their minds. So there's just this constant change, and this is really something that's been going on for quite some time. Somebody is moved from the essential category to the non-essential category. And it has nothing to do with really your profession. It has to do with what you're doing in life. And it has to do with the fact that God has given us our worth because we're made in His image. Right now, tattoo parlors are closed. And I have a friend who owns one. And he's getting by. But through that, and right now, obviously, getting a tattoo is not the highest priority on the list. But I do know that through that business, he has made many contacts, he has helped many people, and he has done a great deal of ministry. And so it's not so much the tattoos or the business, but just how he's used it. And so what we need to realize is that we're made in God's image, and we're all called to do something, and that we are all essential because of what God says, not because of what random people with random opinions say. It is important that we get a proper perspective on ourselves, and counsel will help us do that. When we're beating ourselves up, they can help lift us up. When we're getting a little bit too much on a pedestal, they can bring us down a little bit. And there is a great verse in Galatians that talks about this very thing. This is Galatians 6, starting verse 3. I'm going to read Galatians chapter 6, verses 3 through 5. It says this: "If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You are not that important." That's pretty blunt. "Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. And you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct." So it's very important that we realize that we all we beat ourselves up and then we elevate ourselves too much, but we have to have that proper perspective, and it needs to be the same perspective that God has on us. And we need to approach that from the standpoint, I have something to do, I have something to contribute because God says I do, and then do that thing that He's called us to do. You know, when it comes to getting counsel, there are areas that we really don't want to do that. And the two biggest ones, I believe, are our profession and our marriage, which really takes up about 80% of our waking hours. And I can't stress enough, first of all, if you and your spouse have an issue and you believe that you need a professional counselor, I'm asking you to please go and get that help. My wife and I, we've been to a professional counselor. It wasn't because of anything outrageous or horribly critical. It wasn't because of alcoholism or an affair or anything along those lines. But we just had an issue that we were struggling with. We had gotten stuck, and we needed somebody on the outside looking in to help give us the perspective that we needed so that we could move forward. And there is no shame in that. And it seems like in every married couple, there's one who doesn't mind counseling and there's one who thinks it's the most terrible thing in the world. It's not. Go ahead and take that step and be willing to work on your marriage. Your marriage is important and it is worth working on. And so don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and get a little assistance. And the other thing that we need to work on, of course, is our profession. And I especially want to say this when I am speaking to a military community. You know, a while back, I came from Cambodia on a mission trip. I was there for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks. And while I was there, I saw some really terrible things, some things that really, it affected me more this time than it did last time. And one of the things that I realized as I was talking to people in the military about what I had seen, and as I was hearing stories of other people who also were talking to their military spouses, is that really we had just seen the surface. We had just seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how far a human being will go to hurt another human being. And if just 2 weeks of what I saw can mess a person up, then I can't imagine what it means to see those things on a much deeper level for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And I know in the military you're told to just kind of compartmentalize and to shove it into a little ball and just stick it way down and until it turns into an ulcer. But I can't stress enough the fact that you may need some help with that, and that there is no shame in it. It's not weakness, it's not shameful, it's not bad, it's not wrong. It is something that you might need. And I know that there's all kinds of issues that come with that when it comes to being anonymous and confidentiality and all of those things, and I get that. But if you need that assistance, I'm asking you, please go and do that, because there's no shame in it. And another thing that I want to go ahead and just take a moment and put in a shameless plug is that all of the staff, we do counseling. And we are kind of a first step when it comes to that. If we feel like you have something that we can't help you with, then we will refer you to someone else. But you can reach any of us by our first name and then spoutsprings.org. So for me, it would be barry@spoutsprings.org. And if there's something you want to talk about and I feel like it's something I can help you with, then please feel free to email me. Okay? And it's the same thing for everyone else on staff. But I want to encourage you to please do that. You know, it says in Proverbs 12:15, it says this: "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice." And it talks over and over again about the importance of getting counsel, getting advice, hearing from others, so that we can do the right thing and so that we can get unstuck and move forward. And I heard an excellent illustration not too long ago about how we have two hands, and one is for taking and one is for giving, and how we need to be receiving with one and giving with the other, because we not only need help, but we also need to be needed. We need to be asked for help. That's a need that resides within us, and we need to be willing to be able to share with others and to help others. You know, one of the things that is on the app that I hope you'll download is on there. There's a spot that talks about some ways that you can help, and how this afternoon we have a food drive that is going on. It's going to be at the church, and we hope that you will help with that, because these are people that need help. They need help so that they can help others. They're receiving from us so that they can pass that on to someone else. And that's just an excellent example of what it is that we all should be doing and what the church really stands for. And I hope that you will just take a moment to really think about this. It's not shameful, it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's just sometimes it's necessary. I also want to encourage you to take a moment to think about, it could be that you realize that you haven't had a relationship with Jesus Christ. This is something that you've never made a decision about, and it is something that you're ready to partake in. If you're on the online platform, a button will come up soon that will lead you to a place where you can go through our interactive blue bag, and it will explain very simply what it means to be a follower of Christ. If you're not there and you need that link, just email me and I will send it to you. But one of the things that is absolutely vital is that wisdom really does come from the Lord. And I believe that when we have that relationship with Jesus Christ, our ability to find wise counsel just increases dramatically. Well, folks, I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you'll take the things that I know that are difficult for some people to hear. And I hope that you'll just take the time to really think about it, really consider it. And we're going to close out with one more song. But before we do, I'd really like to pray for you. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the fact that you have given us marriage. It is something that you set up. And you have also given us the church. And both of these are perfect examples of how we can find good counsel, wise advice. And I pray, Lord, that everyone that is listening to this will be willing to find that good friend, that accountability, whatever it is that they need, that they will simply think about reaching out to someone else. And understand that this is something that we all need, that we all require. And that, Lord, you will simply give them wisdom as they reach out to others and find the help that they may need. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Folks, thank you for listening. Have a great morning. We're going to close out with one more worship song. Be blessed.